राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। गोपीजना वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। गोपीजना वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। गोपीजना वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। जय जय गोपीजना वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। जय जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। यशोदानंदन ब्रज जनरंजन। यशोदानंदन ब्रज जनरंजन। यशोदानंदन ब्रज जनरंजन। यशोदानंदन ब्रज जनरंजन। यमुना तीर वनचारी। यमुना तीर वनचारी। जय जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। जय ओम विष्णुपद परमहंस परविशगाचार्य अष्टोत्तरशत श्री श्रीमद श्रील अभय चरणानंद भक्ति वेदांत साई महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। नामाचार्य श्रील ठाकुर हरिदास की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंद राधा कुंद गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। वृंदावन धाम की जय। नवद्वीप मायापुर धाम की जय। गंगा देवी की जय। यमुना मई की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। तुलसी रानी की जय। समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद्भागवतम की जय। इस्कॉन बीबीथी संस्थापक आचार्य श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। श्री श्री गौरनीताय की जय। जगन्नाथ बलराम सुभद्रा देवी की जय। श्री श्री राधा गोविंद जी की जय। श्री श्री राधा कलाचंद जी की जय। गौ प्रेमानंदे। All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishne Swadhamopagate Dhanamajnanadibhisah Kalau Nashtadrisham Esha Puranarko Dhunoditah. That's the first canto, chapter 3, text 43. If anybody's got a burning desire to learn the verse, that's where it is. So today we're continuing our discussion of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 1, text number 11, which, as we know, is a very well-known verse. I'm going to repeat it again, just for the benefit of those who may not have heard earlier. Etan nirvidyamananam ichhatam ukuto bhayam yoginam nripanirnitam harirnamanu kirtanam. That means, O King, the constant chanting of the holy name of the Lord after the ways of the great authorities is the doubtless and fearless way of success for all, including those who are free from all material desires, and those who are desirous of all material enjoyment, and those who are self-satisfied by dint of transcendental knowledge. So Srila Prabhupada has largely summarized the commentaries of all of his predecessors, as we've already heard, but we didn't quite finish Jiva Goswami's commentary on this verse, which is the most extensive. It's in his Krama Sandarbha Krama Sandarbha is not one of the 6 Sandarbhas, but it's called that anyways, Krama Sandarbha, and it functions virtually as his commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, where did we leave off? Yeah, I think so. We were on the 7th offense. We had just finished the 6th offense. So we had some discussion about how the demigods and Vishnu are different, but they're not different at the same time in the sense that they're representing Vishnu and they're empowered by Vishnu. And we talked about not neglecting the order of the spiritual master as well as blaspheming Vedic literature. Those are important things to think that the glory of the holy name is just exaggeration and to concoct some understanding about the holy name that's not bona fide. Vallabhacharya came to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu one day and he said, "I've written my commentary on the holy name. Please hear it." And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu simply replied, "As far as I'm concerned, the holy name is Yashodanandan and Shyam Sundar, and that's it." So, Krishna is a holy name. Whatever Krishna is, that's what his holy name is, period. No further discussion needed. Okay, so now we're on this, what has sometimes been called the worst offense, which is to commit sinful activities with the expectation that you can then chant Hare Krishna and neutralize the reactions. And Prabhupada said actually that we all have this tendency to some degree. Just like people say that youth is meant for your enjoyment in this world, and when you get old, then you do bhajan, right? This is a common conception. So that's kind of a second cousin of this principle that let me sinful activities now, as they say, sowing your wild oats, and then later on when I mature and have some wisdom, then I can maybe. The problem is that it's very difficult to do that when you're old. Anybody's old here? You can confirm. It becomes harder and harder to do the simple things. And so it's not the time to learn new things or to learn new disciplines or to change your habits. It doesn't work like that. Kaumadam acharet prajno. You got to do it when you're young. Okay, so first of all, we should begin with Mangalacharana. Om Jnana Timenantasya Jnanan Janashalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayati Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhya evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Madgavirapi Gopala Swikuryat Kripaya Yadi Tadaivasam Payahapi Tva Rishi Yustat Priyajanaha. Now, committing sin on the strength of the name will be discussed. Jiva Goswami is speaking. Though the results of sins are destroyed by the strength of the name, if the person uses the name to fulfill sinful, despicable desires, it is most wicked. Power of the names should actually bring about attachment to the lotus feet of the Lord, composed of condensed eternity, knowledge, and bliss. What does Rupa Goswami say about this? The holy name is condensed eternity, knowledge, and bliss. In another way, he says, what is that? Suditashhrita janarti rashige ramyat chit ghana sukha swarupa. He calls the holy name of the Lord ramyat chit ghana sukha swarupa. He's the highly concentrated essence of bliss, spiritual bliss. Bliss which is characterized by complete knowledge. In this material world we have momentary bliss from time to time, but it's ignorant. But this is the kind of bliss that the holy name is embodying, is spiritual bliss that is eternal. And it's very highly concentrated bliss, not like any of the so-called bliss that we find in this material world. So, he says, if one utilizes the name for enjoying sins, the offense is 10 million times greater than the sin itself. In devotional service, we don't really have to worry too much about sins, actually. We really don't. Because the very nature of devotional service is that it destroys sins as well as the tendency to sin even, particularly chanting the holy name. The problem is that we're wicked, as he said. He's using the word, not me. We have infected hearts, and it's kind of like, coronavirus. Coronavirus. So somebody gave a class in Vrindavan. If you're infected with the coronavirus, you may not have symptoms, but you can infect other people nonetheless. We saw that in recent years. So we have sinful tendencies, and that is exactly what obstructs our pure chanting of the holy name. So we have this tendency to use the holy name to wipe our slate clean, so to speak, and then start anew. The tendency to commit sin is not yet eradicated from our hearts because we're not making an effort to reduce these offenses. It's important that we make that effort. That's devotional service. Why else would we chant these offenses every morning, recite these offenses, just to keep it fresh in our mind? Because you've got to fight them every day, all day long. You have to fight these offenses. The tendency to idly criticize another devotee, or the tendency to, the assumption that these demigods and Krishna are all one and the same thing. Certainly we all neglect the orders of the spiritual master. Sometimes people blaspheme the Vedic literature, or we have a tendency, most of us actually have this tendency to think that all this glorification of the holy name is just bombast. It's just meant to cajole us and convince us to chant the holy name, but I'm experiencing that I still have material desires even though I'm chanting. Therefore, it's just exaggeration, all this stuff. That's not true. And sometimes we concoct our own understanding of what the holy name is. And as we're discussing now, we commit sins with the expectation. I actually know someone who did this. Someone in San Diego, not initiated devotee, but he was a congregational member. So, and he got caught because what he was doing was illegal. And he did it deliberately, and his plan was that he will chant Hare Krishna afterwards. So Krishna gave him a nice facility to chant without distraction in prison. So, this is our tendency. We're criminals. Really, that's what it comes down to. We have to be humble enough to admit that we're criminals. At least we have a criminal mentality. And that's what impels us to use the holy name for our purpose, instead of using ourselves for its purpose. Holy name wants to spread all over the world and wants to remain in everyone's heart, but we want everything for ourselves. This is the problem. And that's why we can't really chant. That's why we don't get a taste. We're committing these offenses. This is the problem. So, and here he says, therefore, what to speak of sins, the reactions of offenses is actually 10 million times worse, because a sinful reaction, you'll have to pay for it, but you only pay once. If you commit offenses, you can't get rid of that unless you really, really humble yourself before the holy name and get the blessings of Vaishnavas and understand Sambandha Gyan. How do you do that? By reading Prabhupada's books. Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains in his Harinama Chintamani, I believe it's there, or maybe it's his Bhajan Rahasya, I don't remember, that only a person who lacks in Sambandha Gyan will offend the holy name. So, we have to consider this. Do I really know Srila Prabhupada's books as much as I think I do? Have I really assimilated this philosophy as much as me or other people conceive? No, because we're still offending the holy name. Narottam Das Thakur says, Gauranga bolite hobe pulaka sharir. What is it? Hari Hari bolite noyani babinir. As soon as I begin to chant the name of Gauranga, the tears are just flooding from my eyes. We saw this. We actually saw this in the character of Srila Prabhupada. Many devotees can affirm this. Sometimes Srila Prabhupada the tears would just fly out from his eyes as if from a pichkari. Pichkari means those big syringe kind of thing that they play holy with. They squirt gun. Just flying out from his eyes, many feet, 6 feet away, the person gets wet. That doesn't happen in this material world, does it? I've never seen that before anywhere else. So this is the ecstasy that's produced when a person is free from offenses, when a person has cultivated Sambandha Gyan by reading Srila Prabhupada's books and really assimilating and learning those books actually and memorizing those books. We heard yesterday, Prabhupada himself told us, you should learn these books the way lawyers know their books. Then you'll be able to defend yourself from the onslaught of Maya. Otherwise, the big tidal wave comes. It's just a question of, which test is big enough to knock you over, that's all. Nobody knows what's coming next. Do you know what's going to happen to you 6 months down the road? We don't know. So, Maya can show us the real naked form of what we are most vulnerable to. She can easily do that. And most devotees, actually, it's a fact. The stats are there in Bhagavad Gita. No? What verse am I thinking of? Most devotees will fall and leave Krishna consciousness. Huh? Yeah, Manushyanam Sahasreshu, Krishna says. Out of many thousands of people, maybe one person is serious. We're all sitting in this room this morning because we're a little serious. But even out of the people in this room, Krishna says, I'm not saying, he says, hardly one is going to really understand fully. It's not that easy thing. It's a very simple thing, but it's not so easy thing. Because we don't want it. Again, we're infected. So the Sambandha Gyan is there to help us unravel this knot, or cut through this knot, rather, of heavy attachments based on ignorance. We're thick ignorance. Ghanibhuta ignorance, as they say in Sanskrit. Rup Goswami said about the holy name, we heard a moment ago, Ramya Chit Ghana Sukha Swarupa. The holy name embodies highly concentrated spiritual ecstasy in highly concentrated form. Ghana. Ghana means thick. So, any Gujaratis here? You like Shrikant. Everybody's had Shrikant. Shrikant is just yogurt, but it's really thick. So it's heavy. So this is what we're talking about. Really thick ecstasy, heavy ecstasy, that comes when we have this thick knowledge, really concentrated knowledge. It takes little practice. In his commentary on Bhagavad Gita, first say 5-6 verses of chapter 17. What does chapter 17 deal with in Bhagavad Gita? Who could tell me? What's the topic of chapter 17? Nobody knows? Chapter 17 deals with the divisions of faith. How do we divide faith? On what basis? Yeah, our faith is in various modes. Some of us are having tamasic faith. Those are the people who feel that it's dharma to, fly a jet liner into the World Trade Center, for example. That's tamasic faith. Other people have rajasic faith. Those are the people who want to come to the temple. They're worshiping Krishna, but they want to make sure they get a plaque with their name on it, that he's the biggest donor, and everybody knows his name is there, and this is passion. It's also faith, but it's passion. Sattvic faith means I just want to do what Krishna wants, and I only want to do it for his pleasure. Or that's transcendental faith, but sattvic faith would be, it's my duty to serve God, so I'm going to do my duty without any question of what's in it for me. That's sattvic faith. And then from that sattva guna, we can actually come to pure Krishna consciousness, in which we're only concerned about pleasing Krishna because we love him. Now we don't have this love. So Baladev Vidyabhushan explains in this regard that people have 3 modes of faith in this way, but those modes of faith can be divided into 2 categories. This is esoteric knowledge. It's not so widely known, and unfortunately it should be really discussed more often than it is, but people don't read, so they wouldn't know. But he says there is swabhavaja faith. That is faith that is just born of your nature. If you're pious, like Indians, they just, they know what dharma is. At least they have some idea, even if it's the wrong idea. But they have some idea. And they come to the temple and they want to worship God, and they generally not so sinful. At least they didn't used to be. So that's swabhavaja shraddha. Basically it means your tank may be empty, but you're running on fumes. Have you heard this expression? So they have to understand, you got to refill your tank, Baba, otherwise you're going down because you're absorbed in a lot of nonsense, right? So, but they're kept okay for some time, just on the strength of the nature alone. But that doesn't really help you to advance, and it will run out of gas, as we said. So better than that, he says, is those who take the trouble to associate with sadhus and hear from them the scriptures and try to apply those scriptures in their life by following the process of bhakti, vidhi bhakti, and thereby they gain what he calls, Shastrajanya faith. I believe that's his term. I don't remember exactly. But, faith that is based on Shastra, actually. Shastra yonitvat, Vyasadeva writes in the Vedanta Sutra. Actually, everything is coming from Shastra. Anything authoritative its origin is Shastra only. We discussed this a little bit yesterday, but Prabhupada also says this in his, I think it's the Antyalila chapter 20, text number 3 something. I'm sorry, I don't remember just offhand, but Prabhupada mentions very clearly, out of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, the actual center is Shastra. That's consistent with Vyasadeva's assertion, Shastra yonitvad. Yoni means womb. Everything is born out of Shastra, that's what he's saying. And there's a lot of commentary on that verse by Baladev Vidyabhushan, who's our Vedanta Acharya. But the point that I'm making here is that we may have this swabhavaja faith based on a pious nature, but we can't really depend on that because it won't last very long. In the association that we generally take. What is that association that we generally take? Your piety is being assaulted on all sides through all 10 gates of your body. It's coming in your ears, it's going into your eyes, up your nose, you're touching, tasting, everything. And so the stimuli that we're receiving every day through our organic senses is basically impious. Because it's Kali Yuga and everybody is sinful, everything is contaminated, everything is haywire. We were talking about the rain the other day, even in Vrindavan. Used to be that you could depend on the rain like clockwork. To a day, you could predict when it would come. And it's not like that now. Anytime, anything can happen anywhere. It's, haywire. So, yeah, we're under constant assault by the Kali Yuga. But fortunately, this holy name is Kalimalamatanam. One anonymous poet from ancient times has written. It destroys all this filth of the Kali Yuga. But it really helps if we have a pious nature to begin with, but we have to cultivate that pious nature further. We have to perfect that pious nature by making any effort to really assimilate, I mean to say. That means you realize Sambandha Gyan, because unless and until you come to this state, you not only remain a Kanishta Adhikari, subject to fall down at any minute, but you will not be able to free yourself from these 10 offenses. This is the real thing. Gyan is very, very important in this way. It's not everything. Mercy is higher than Gyan, but Gyan is very important. So, therefore, he can say this, that if one uses the name for enjoying sins, then his offense is 10 million times greater than sin itself. These offenses, they're very hard to get rid of. If you have an offensive mentality, it's very difficult to get rid of it. But by Krishna consciousness and mainly by mercy, if we're humble and receptive to mercy, then we can advance. And even we can become freed from this criminal nature that we've accumulated over who knows how many eons of conditional life in this material world. So, thus it is said that there's no purification of that person punished by unlimited punishers, yama, or by following many rules, yama, to regain his status through atonement. This is kind of awkwardly worded. It's not my translation, but what he means is that the verse that he's paraphrasing, that he's commenting on, Jiva Goswami, it is Yamair hi shuddhi nahi. There's no purification even by yama. And I think we mentioned already, yama, you can take it to mean Yamaraj, the person who sends you to hell and punishes you. That doesn't necessarily purify your heart. Or yama can mean whatever personal discipline you're doing, like we heard already, dharma vrata tyago hutadi sarva shubha kriya. This is not all equal to the holy name. To be renounced, or to give in charity, or to perform some austerity, or to do your dharma very faithfully, it's not the same as chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, with purely devotional intention. It's not the same. And even all these vrats and tyaga and shastric injunctions following very strictly, they're not going to give you the same benefit. And they're not even going to relieve you actually of offenses. If you're clinging to those offenses, sometimes people do this. As if there was any such thing as Vikarma yoga. I mean, this is a thing that I'm trying to understand. We always preach that, even if you commit sinful activities, when you're working on Krishna's direction, then it's great. It's fine. There's no reaction. Just like Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. He was killing his family members. That's not really very nice, is it? It's a heavy sinful activity, heavy sin. And his family members are devotees. And we heard the other day about what it means to the physical offense to the devotees. He's doing this. But because he's definitely doing this on Krishna's say-so, therefore there's no reaction. Krishna says, I've exonerated you. So if Arjuna could commit sinful activity on Krishna's order, then why can't we commit pious activity on Krishna's order? We have the order. Srila Prabhupada gave this instruction, say, for example, to perform Daivi Varnashram within ISKCON, to implement within our society. He gave roughly 80% of his instructions on this topic in the last 3 years that he was with us. And he even went so far as to say that this is the remaining 50% of his mission. And we've already heard that to neglect the order of the spiritual master is even worse than blaspheming devotees. Did we not hear this? So, and this is Jiva Goswami's authority, not mine. So, certainly we can commit pious activities when the spiritual master orders, if we can also commit sinful activities when Krishna orders directly. And that's very rare anyways. But the point being made here is that through any kind of discipline, or even through Yamaraja's personal punishment, it's not going to relieve you from the offensive mentality. So that we have by all means to try to avoid these offenses, because otherwise once we get habituated in that trajectory, then we're definitely going to hell. We heard that already yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, I don't remember. So, Jiva Goswami continues, as will be stated later, the only atonement is continuous chanting of the name. He quoted the verse in this regard. Do we remember this? Nama paradha yuktanam haranti, what is that? Harantyeva? I don't remember just now, but any kind of sinful activity, even if you're offensive to the holy name, if you're chanting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, constant chanting, then you'll be free from offenses. But who's ready to do that? Certainly not the person who has a tendency to commit sins on the strength of chanting. An offender will hardly be able to do that. So it's, it's a theoretical solution, but good luck. If you get some extreme blessings, maybe you can do that. But the general process is just carry out the system. Just carry out the process of bhakti yoga, followed by following the orders of the spiritual master. And gradually, we will become elevated if we are sincere. And sincerity means if we make this effort to really assimilate Sambandha Gyan and avoid all the 10 offenses. So then Jiva Goswami says, it was also said, Namno pi sarva surhado hyaparadhat patatyathaha. That was from one of the Puranas. We heard it yesterday. Somebody who commits offenses to the name, even if he's a friend of all beings, he will still fall down. So it's very, very dangerous. Then he gives an example. Indra wanted to kill Vritra. Vritra was actually a devotee also, even though he was in the guise of a demon, but actually he was a devotee. So Indra wanted to kill Vritra by the strength of worshipping the Lord through a horse sacrifice. However, this desire was supported by the sages who desired to terminate Vritra's demon body and stop the havoc in the world. Therefore, it was not an offense on Indra's part. You see how subtle it can get? It's really hard to understand things sometimes. It would seem, well, wait a minute, he's killing, we know the backstory that Vritra is a devotee, and he's killing a devotee that we've already heard, it's an offense. But this was a special case, because basically Krishna wanted it to happen. And Krishna's will is usually manifested through the opinion of the sages. All these sages, they desired that, let's do this guy a favor. Let's just terminate his demon body because he's acting a demon, so we can act like suras who kill demons. But actually the whole thing was being transpired on the platform of Krishna consciousness. And Vritra was freed from his body, and then he returned to his position. And also the world was freed from his influence. Therefore, Indra did not commit an offense. It can be a little subtle. So that's committing sins on the strength of the holy name. We have to be very, very careful of that. And again, there's no such thing as vikarma yoga. There's only karma yoga. And karma means dharma. Actually, karma in the widest sense, it means any kind of activity. In a little more narrow sense, it means fruitive activity. And in a more ritual sense, it means dharma. Fruitive activity, well, karma in the second sense, actually, it's the same thing, because fruitive activity is always performed under the injunction of shastric nishedas and vidhis. What does Krishna say about this in chapter 16? Anybody know? Tasmat chastram pramanam te karya vijanataha acharati atmanaha shreyas tato yati paramgatim. He says that you should always decide what to do and what not to do only on the basis of Shastra. And that's the positive side. We always want to have both positive and negative. So in the negative side, he had already spoken. What is that? Somebody who gives up the Shastra conjunction. Yashastra vidham utsrijya vartate kamakarataha nasa siddhim avapnoti na sukham na paramgatim. He doesn't get perfection of any kind, no success. And he certainly doesn't get the supreme destination. But he doesn't even become happy. If you try to give up the Shastric injunctions and just act on your own desire, whatever, even if you think it's Krishna conscious, it doesn't work. Krishna says twice, both positively and negatively in chapter 16 at the end. He says it won't work. So this is the definition of real karma, means dharma. So that has to be done, because there's only two things. There's dharma and there's adharma. If it's not dharma, then it's adharma. And Narad Muni, who happens to be our Sampradaya Acharya, for your information, he is speaking with Yudhishthira in Canto 7, I think it was Yudhishthira, and he breaks this adharma down into 5 divisions, which you can study in your own time. I'm not going to dilate on that because we don't want to get too far off course. That's Canto 7, chapter 15, texts 12 through 14. 5 kinds of adharma. Things that look like dharma, things that are somebody else's dharma, things that are actually just cheating dharma, pretentious. All these things are mentioned. So we have to be careful of those things. Because if we're not doing our own dharma properly, then we're doing one of those 5 things. And they're adharma. That's what he says. So, all right, so that's sinning on the strength of the holy name. Now, pramada. This is the next offense. It seems Jiva Goswami is taking it as a separate category. Or maybe he's continuing. Let's read and see what he says. It is madness, he says. Pramada means madness. To think that chanting the holy names is equivalent to dharma and vratas. This means that it's an offense to think in that way. Thus it is said, Vedaksharani yavanti partitani dvijatibhi davanti harinamani kiritani nasamshayaha. Kirtitani nasamshayaha. There's no doubt that whatever is achieved by Brahmanas reciting the syllables of the Vedas is achieved by singing the names of the Lord. We heard this a few days ago, that bhakti includes everything. It automatically, Krishna says, if you perform bhakti properly, you will get the result of pious activities, you'll get the result of jnana, you'll get the results of yoga as well. But you have to do it properly. Okay, so then he says, the comparison is made here to show that the powers of the name alone are what are going to affect this. It's not that these are 2 separate options. I can be pious or I can just chant. No, you have to chant. But to chant properly, you have to be pious. How do we know this? We mentioned yesterday, Prabhupada has instructed us, whatever you claim about spiritual life, you have to refer to the Shastra, correct? So how do we know that this is true? How do we know that you have to be pious in order to become Krishna conscious? Think about chapter 7. I'm giving you a hint. I'll give a stronger hint. End of chapter 7. Okay, last verse in chapter 7. Text 28. Yesham tvantagatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandvamohanyaramuktat bharante mam dradhavrataha. Krishna says, those persons who can sustain a mature commitment to pure devotional service are the ones who have already done their pious stuff and they're still doing their pious things. So that's an important consideration. And, conversely, what he actually says is that, if you are not situated in piety, then you're going to have a hard time. Anybody having a hard time? Because as we said already, the impiety is everywhere. It's just, it's constantly, it's going up our nose, in our mouth, and we're touching it with everything we're feeling. Impiety permeates this age of Kali Yuga. But this holy name is more powerful than Kali Yuga. What's another nice verse in the, I think it's in the 11th canto, maybe 12th canto, he says, Pumsam kalikritan doshan dravya deshatma sambhavan sarvan harati chittasto bhagavan purushottama. Bhagavan Purushottama within our hearts as Paramatma, he purifies all 3 categories of Kali Yuga's infection. And what are those 3 categories? We have bad environment, that's called Desha Sambhava Dosha. And we're working with contaminated stuff, just like one toxicologist in Houston told me, that there is no aquifer in North America that is not freed from mercury, cadmium, industrial runoff, fertilizer contamination. We're not talking about rivers and lakes, my friends. We're talking about the aquifers themselves. The sources of spring water that we drink, right? Ozarka spring water. Sorry. All of it's contaminated. What to speak of? What is that other one that we buy? Safeway spring water. Not spring water, purified water. It's an important thing to think about. Water has to have prana. Anything that we ingest It has to have prana in it. And prana that's taken from, that's sitting still for too long, it dies, just like anything, if you don't nourish it. So spring water is better to drink than just ordinary distilled water. And tap water, we know, is out of the question. So this is called dravya sambhava dosha. You're dealing with faulty, even the elements are all contaminated now in Kali Yuga. What to speak of the people. And then there's atma sambhava dosha. That means all the doshas that we bring with us. We all have baggage from 8,400,000 previous species of life, isn't it? And all the mental residue is still there in our heads. Why do you sometimes wonder, where did that desire come from? I never realized I might want to do that. Well, you've been around for a while and these things are floating in the mind, and every once in a while they pop up, and that's the mind. Therefore the mind has to be beaten to death. Not exactly to death, but beaten into submission. So, but anyway, these are our three kinds of doshas. And in Kali Yuga, they're very prominent, but the holy name can conquer all of these if we chant it properly. If we don't chant it properly, no guarantee. You'll make advancement. Definitely you will make advancement, but it will take some time. How long? Well, that depends on you. Tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. The injunction in the Bhagavatam is, you do tivra bhakti. What does tivra bhakti means? Yes, I'm going to get up early every morning. I'm going to read Prabhupada's books every day. I'm going to try to avoid these offenses. I'm only going to take prasadam. I'm not going to associate with outside people unnecessarily. These things are important. Read the first 6 verses of Upadeshamrita by Rupa Goswami, then you'll know what you have to do. It's very clear. That's how we make advancement. Okay, so.
So when you say associate with outside people, can you elaborate on that?
Yep. The third day in a row, I'm going to say let's keep the comments and questions for the end. That's the etiquette. But yeah, associating with outside people, you have to go to work. You have to deal with maybe your parents are not devotees or something. You have to do these things. That's okay, but do not become intimate, mix intimately with them. In other words, don't eat with them, don't share your mind with them, don't give and receive gifts in charity with them. The things that we are advised to do with the devotees, we should not be doing with the devotees so much. If it can be avoided, sometimes it cannot be avoided, that's life, but we have to try to avoid. That's the idea. Because if you share your mind with a non-devotee is somebody who has dedicated himself to competing with Krishna and exploiting Krishna's resources, and they tend to be unscrupulous according to Bhagavatam. Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma, it says. Yadindriya pritaya apranoti. A person who is in the bodily concept of life, that's going to be his priority. Whatever the senses and mind demands. And he's not going to mind even messing up his friend, if need be. It all depends. It's a fine art. It's a very fine art. Best thing is you take guidance from those who are more experienced, because they know. Sometimes a person is ready to come right away. You preach to him and he's receptive. Fine, great. Sometimes the book has to sit on the shelf for 10 years, and then one day he picks it up when he's ripe, and then boom, the light bulb goes off. Sometimes a person can only handle prasadam. Sometimes a person is a musician. He may want to join the kirtan. Infinite number of ways. Bohushakha hinandascha. Depending on what kind of sensuality he's attached to. So it all depends.
But also, like you said, this Kali Yuga, it's the material world, by staying in a group of devotees and not branching out and actually facing, the world that we live in.
Yes.
How is that spiritual advancement? That's just spiritual comfort.
Spiritual?
Comfort?
Yeah, but even that doesn't work, because, it is like this. Sometimes they say, you may not be interested in politics, but politicians are interested in you. And Kali Yuga is like that. You may not be interested in all the stuff on the outside, but as we said, it's invading your very body. What to speak of your social life? So you have to deal with it, my friend, and the way to deal with it is output, preaching Krishna consciousness. That's the only way to deal with it. And the question is how we preach, That's what you're asking. So yeah, it depends on the person, the time, the place, the circumstance. It's all very sophisticated and subtle as well. So it's best to take advice from the senior devotees. Is that okay? We can discuss it later, maybe after class. But now that I've almost lost my train of thought, let's see what we were saying that. Anybody remember what I was saying? We should read 6 verses of... Yeah, I mean, we have to try to make an effort to advance spiritually, serious effort. We have to exercise volition. Just like I was talking to somebody the other day, he says, it's hard to read Prabhupada's books every day. Baba, you eat every day, do you not? Nobody says it's hard to eat every day. It's just, I don't have time. Very few people say that, at least. You've got to be really passionate to be that bad. And those are the people who get cancer anyway, because it's unhealthy. But yeah, I mean, you have to exercise your volition. You have to be serious and do it. Whatever it takes. Somehow or other, just, you have to adjust. So this is the point. Now, all right, then he says, Madhuram madhurametan mangalam mangalanam. Sakalanigamadalli satpalam chit sarupam. The name of Krishna, Jiva Goswami is quoting from, where is this verse? I think it's in Brihad Bhagavatamritam. That Krishna's name is sweeter than the sweetest, the most auspicious of all things auspicious, the highest fruit in the tree that is the Vedas, and it's composed entirely of pure consciousness. Actually, this verse is from Padma Purana. Chit Swarupam. It's like Chit Ghana Sukha Swarupam. And Chit Swarupam, same thing. Then he quotes, Rig Vedo hi yajurveda samavedo hyatharvanaha adhitas tena yenoktam harirdit dvayam. He who recites the 2 syllables Hari has already studied the Rig Veda, the Yajurveda, Samaveda, and the Atharva Veda. This is from Vishnu Dharmottara. Parvati says, Maricho Mayajastata Ma Sama Parhakanchana Govindeti Harirnama Geyam Gaya Swanir Nityashaha. Don't bother chanting the Rig, Yajur, and Samaveda. The Lord's name, Govinda, should be chanted. Chant it always. This is from Skanda Purana. So, we can utilize our time in chanting the 4 Vedas. Somebody has to do it, that's good. Never any harm. But those of us who have been awakened to Krishna consciousness, we should use our full time for performing Hari Sankirtana Krishna. And then, in glorifying the 108 names of Rama, it is said, Vishnur Ekaikanamaiva Sarva Vedadhikam Matam. Every name of Vishnu is greater than all the Vedas. This is again in Padma Purana. So giving the name to the faithless, this is now we're graduated to the 9th offense. We're not talking about the 8th offense anymore. Giving the holy name to the faithless illustrates an offense committed by an instructor of the holy name rather than simply chanting. Again, I'm not real fond of this translation. It's kind of awkward, but the offense is you should not preach to those who are not willing to accept instruction, and you should not try to preach to those who are actually opposed to Krishna consciousness, because it just becomes obnoxious and everybody has a bad experience, including Krishna. He doesn't like it. So, yeah, that's all he says. He doesn't say anything more about it. Enough said, maybe. Then he's graduating to the 9th offense, or in some ways it's classified as a 10th offense. When the holy name is offended by somebody who has already heard the instructions, the idea is that he has no respect for the name even after hearing its glories, because he's so completely absorbed in I and mine. So this person is an offender. It's very, I think it's pretty clear. If your heart is full of I, me, mine, then where's the room for Krishna's name? One poet in Braj Pasha, he said, if the door to devotional service is jammed shut, bolted, and locked, then how is Hari going to enter your heart? Not possible. You don't want him there. You want to fill it with your own concerns. That's okay, but that's to be an offender. You won't get full benefit from chanting. Namaikam yasya vachi smarana patagatam shrotamulam gatam va shuddham va shuddham varnam vyavahita rahitam taryatyeva satyam tacche deha dravana janata lobha pashanda madhye nikshittam syan nafalajanakam shigramevatra vipra. Nice. This means anyone who chants, remembers, or hears even one name of the Lord truly surpasses pure or impure caste without obstacles. You may not have the highest birth in this world. I don't. But it doesn't matter. If you've chanted the name even once, is what he's saying here. You can transcend that if you're serious. But if the name is given to offenders, like Pashandas, whom we've already discussed, those who are greedy for bodily objects and following and followers and all that, then it does not give its results quickly. That's, in other words, shigram nikshiptam syan napalajanakam shigram. The result of chanting will come. If you chant, there will always be benefit, but it will not come very soon. So this is a thing we have to consider about chanting the holy name. So the above quotation shows that the pashanda nature is caused by greed for the bodily sense gratification, for followers, for various objects. This all indicates commission of 10 offenses. So all the offenses are permeated within this pashanda attitude, sinful attitude. And we have that attitude, unfortunately. At entry-level Krishna consciousness, that's where we're at, unfortunately. We have to work on it. Another offense of this type is described in Padma Purana in glorification of Vaishakha month. That is to say, quote, persons who, disrespecting the chanting of the Lord's name, leave that place where the name is chanted, go to a terrible hell because of that sinful act. Atonement for these offenses is also stated. This is the verse I quoted before, actually. We've got it now. Nama paratha yuktanam namani eva haranti agham. Avishranti prayuktani tani evarta karani cha. For those who have committed offenses to the name, chanting the name incessantly will be effective in destroying that result. So if one offends a devotee, it is advised to continually chant the name in order to satisfy that devotee. It's seen in the story of Ambarish that the offense to Ambarish was mitigated only by Durvasa approaching Ambarish as directed by the Lord. It is said in Namakomadi, Mahad aparadhasya bhoga eva nivartakaha tadanugrohova. One can eradicate a great offense by experiencing its results. In other words, you just eat the reaction and tolerate it and bear it until it runs out. Or obtaining the mercy of the devotee. This is with regard to offending a devotee. But actually the same principle can be applied to the holy name. You're just going to have to wait for the time that the reactions to your offenses run dry. And meanwhile, you hope, against all hope, that Krishna will be kind. And sometimes he is. What's an example of Krishna being kind to somebody who didn't really deserve it? Ajamila's one. Putana's one. These are both in the Bhagavatam. There are many examples we see. Sometimes, inexplicably, a person who is even offensive can become Krishna conscious. Just mercy. It's unpredictable, it's inscrutable, it's unstoppable. This is mercy. Amazing grace, the Christians sing. Because it is amazing. There's much we can say about that, but anyway, now he concludes his commentary with what verse? Today's verse. The verse that he's commenting on, he quotes. Etan nirvidyamananam ichitamakuto bhayam yoginam nripa nirnitam harer namanu kirtanam. O king, continuous chanting of the name of the Lord has been prescribed for devotees, for those with desires for liberation, and for those who desire material elevation, and also those who are satisfied by dint of yoga practice. So, it's time to stop now. In fact, it's overtime. Prema Charu has a burning question, so
chanting and I'm committing strength, I'm committing sinful activity on the strength of the holy name.
Yeah, good question. There's no Bhakta mic today, so I'm just going to repeat your question. How do we tell whether we're sinful but being purified by taking shelter of the name, or whether we're actually in some subtle way we're trying to maintain our attachments while chanting? Is that the essence of your question? Yeah, it's subtle. It's very difficult to understand that. On our own, we can't understand that. That's one of many reasons that we have spiritual masters, because the spiritual master can understand what our heart is. Krishna says in chapter 6, Atmaupam yena sarvatra samam pashyati yorjana sukham vaya diva dukham sa yogi paramo mata. Means, I think, Krishna is giving his opinion, as he does many places in Bhagavad Gita. He said, I think that the best yogi is that person who has empathy. Empathy means you can understand what is another person feeling, what is another person desiring, what is it. Tamal Krishna Goswami was like that. 2 minutes. He could have 2 minutes with just about anybody in this world, and he knows everything about that person. Because he had that vision. He was so good like that. He knows what are his desires, what's his level of faith, what are his misconceptions, what are his bad habits, where's he from, what's his socioeconomic status, background, everything he knew. Because he was so sensitive in that way. And Krishna says, this is the best yogi. Prabhupada had that ability. All the best preachers have that ability. They have to have that ability. So they can see where we stand. And if we take shelter of them, then we will be elevated by their grace, not by our own effort. We don't even have to understand where we stand, actually. We just have to be submissive if we're in the right association. But we can understand if we have very keen intelligence and we have heard enough from Prabhupada's books that, we have this discrimination to understand what's going on. Wait a minute, I'm trying to fulfill my own desire here, aren't I? But it can be very subtle. And generally in the beginning, we can't see any difference. We don't know. We don't have enough experience. But as we move in Krishna consciousness, what is that Krishna says in chapter 15? Yatanto prakatatmano nainam pashyantya chetasaha. Those who are following the process of Krishna consciousness, or who have followed the process of Krishna consciousness, they can see everything very clearly. But unless a person is willing to actually discipline himself and follow the process nicely and make an effort, then that person won't be able to see what's happening even if he tries, because he's actually not trying. That's what it really means. So yeah, I would say the best thing is just depend on the mercy. Mahat sevam dvara mahur vimuktes tamo dvaram yoshitam sangi sangaha ityadi. Just take shelter of the mahats. And then, this is a long discussion back in the 2nd chapter of the 1st canto of Bhagavatam on how a person actually goes through that process that's described in chapter 2, Divinity and Divine Service. And, all the acharyas are all saying it ultimately comes down to Mahat Kripa, or Mahat Seva, the mercy of Mahatmas, devotees, pure devotees. Is that okay? Just like in the 7th canto, Mehiyasham Pararajobhishekam, Prahlad Maharaj says, when his father asked him, what happened to you? And Prahlad said, I took bath in the dust of the lotus feet of Narad Muni. That's what happened. That's how I became Krishna conscious. In effect, that's what he's saying. And Prabhupada is constantly quoting that verse because it's so important. Is that helpful? Oh yeah, Bhakta Mike has arrived. But turn it on.
Continuing the same topic, how to pick, in the current circumstances in the world and even in our society, how do we do Mahat Seva and take shelter of Mahat?
Well, current circumstances, everybody's current circumstances are different, of course. We're all individuals. A world situation is a challenge, no doubt. Even more than it was 5 years ago. It's a big challenge. But we pray, and we follow the instructions of the spiritual master. We follow the basic things, standard thing. We don't have to invent anything new. And Krishna will help. I mean, you ask a general question, I'm giving a general answer. We could be more specific, but we require more specific.
The Vani association is there, but the Vapu association is very limited. And
Look at it this way. We all like intense sense gratification. That's why we want bodies. Nobody wants to be a ghost because the Buddhists call them hungry ghosts. They have tremendous hunger. They have a tremendous aptitude for eating, but they've got a mouth the size of a pinhole. It's frustrating, no? So, a body is a very necessary thing to enjoy sense gratification, which is what we want, and therefore we have this body. But the body is limiting also, because you can't fly, and you can only eat so much, and you're not as wealthy as you'd like to be. Therefore we have the subtle body. And in our dreams, we can do all these things. Any amount of sense, we're unfettered by the restrictions imposed by our karma when we're in the dream state, you see? So it's a little bit like that. Analogously, it's a little bit like that. Is it clear what I'm saying? Yeah, so, it's... we have to work within the restrictions that we're in, and that's reality, and we have to just eat that karma. Apane karma, bhunjay shaman, kohaye lochandas. Or, as Prahlad stated in the Bhagavatam, what is that? Tattenu kampam smikshinamana. This is Brahma, isn't it? Sorry, not Prahlad. Yeah, so... Bhunjana evatma kritam vipakam. I cooked this meal, I gotta eat it. So, we just have to eat our karma and tolerate and persevere. And again, I refer back to Upadeshamrita, first 4 or 5 verses. That's golden advice, priceless advice. But we have to follow it. Okay, anything else? Yes. Yes, and it's important not to share our heart with unscrupulous people, and I also said that all non-devotees must necessarily be unscrupulous. That sounds fanatical, but it's there in the Bhagavatam, and I can explain it later if someone is doubtful.
but sometimes we notice, at least I notice that when I share my heart with devotees, the word gets out of this stuff.
Yeah.
So how to deal with that situation?
When we share our heart even with devotees, sometimes the word gets out and it comes back and it bites, right? So yeah, we have to be very discriminating. Discrimination is a bad word, but we have to discriminate. Who to associate with, who to reveal our hearts to. It's not that it's all one. Some people are trustworthy. I mean to say that even in the hospital, some patients are more sick than other patients. So, if you don't want to catch their disease, then, avoid those persons who are most contagious, right? And similarly, even in Krishna consciousness, we have to choose. Who am I going to associate with to be purified? If the person shares all of my anarthas, and the person also shares all my misconceptions, and the person is also practicing as weakly as I do, then you can't expect that person is going to help you too much. And because he's weak, just as you are, he's probably got motives just as we do, and he can take advantage also. It happens. We've all experienced this. So we have to be a little careful and discriminate. We have to put our faith where it's due. I mean to say that devotees, we're aspiring devotees, but we're still, we have this demonic mentality. Somebody told Prabhupada, sometimes, we feel like we're partly devotee and partly demon. I think it was Bhakti Chaturaswami said this, and Prabhupada told him, partly demon means demon. Yeah, have I discouraged you all? But at the same time, we know that Krishna's mercy, as we said, it's inscrutable, it's unpredictable, it's infinite. So who knows, anything, we can all be purified. And we experience that also. Every one of us has experienced. I'm not vulnerable to Maya's attacks in the same way that I used to be. Because Prabhupada's given us some grace and we've made some advancement, we hope. But we have to be very careful who to associate with. And Rupa Goswami in Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu says, Sajatiya, he has to be in the same category as you. Not just the same caste. Jati also means caste. But, the same class in general. In other words, if I'm an IT engineer, then I want to associate with other IT engineers. If I'm an artist, it's, going to go for that crowd. So, somebody who's like you, you can relate to him, but his faith is deeper than yours. That's the important thing. That's the active ingredient of his association. Without that, it's not potent. Unless his faith is deeper than yours, he can't elevate you. So if somebody, and that person also has to be affectionate. If he's like me and his faith is deep and I respect him, but he doesn't like me, then you're not going to get much mercy from him. He just doesn't like you. What to do? We're all persons. So Rupa Goswami says these three things have to be there. And that's how you choose your association. And elsewhere he tells us that, you should associate with that person who is a Madhyamadikari, he's initiated, you should pay obeisances. You should respect him, honor, explicitly respect him. Kanishtas you can avoid, but you can respect them still. But the real person that you want to really associate with is the Uttama Adhikari, if you can find. And that also is not so easy because sometimes our anarthas blind us to the sun, even. Person is very pure, but we don't want to see it. Or sometimes a person isn't pure. It's we're all very mixed. This is the point. We're very, very mixed. And it's a little complicated. Not a little complicated, it's very complicated. It's more complicated than anyway, it's very complicated. So we have to discriminate. That's the basic answer. Is it okay? Okay.
Basically, Rupa Goswami says to reveal the mind in confidence, and the other half is to keep the information confidential. So when the person makes that decision to divulge, they actually kill themselves.
A person should be, well-bred enough that if this person, in professional circles they call it professional confidentiality, right? You can actually be sued if you're a professional. But, in our social lives there's no such, so people can, they can get away with a lot. And you have to be careful. You have to use your own judgment. But you have to hone that judgment. And, that's another thing. You, Sanatan, you had a question? Sorry. Yeah, you. You look a lot like Sanatan Govinda, that's why. Yeah.
Yeah, so please forgive me if I misheard. I think that you said that we have to work on our anarthas, simply chanting won't help.
It's not like Prabhupada gives this quote from Hitopadesh. Nahi suptasya singhasya pravishanti mukhe murgaha. A lion cannot think that because I'm the king of the jungle, all I have to do is lie down with my mouth open and all the deer are going to run in. It doesn't work like that. The world is not like that. That's utopian. It's idealistic in the extreme. So, we have to make our endeavor, we have to do our part, but we have to understand that it's actually all coming by someone else's potency, not our own. Is that okay?
So, our effort is not sincerely trying to chant, attentively chanting, or is it like something else we need to do to remove our anarthas? What is it like extra effort?
The extra effort is to keep your mind focused on the things that Prabhupada told you to do. That's the extra effort that's required. You don't have to go outside of the spiritual master's instructions in order to find some esoteric rule that they didn't tell you about. And, just like you don't have to go outside of Vishnu to worship some demigods. If you want to win a battle, it's not like you have to go and worship Skanda because he himself is powered by Krishna. So, we just have to follow the basic process, but we don't follow it. This is the problem. If we just follow it, then everything's great. We make very rapid advancement. It's wonderful. But, everybody's thinking that, I can find some shortcut that to surrender really is what it comes down to. You know, won't have to follow the instructions of the spiritual master if I go to Loy Bajar and find a Rasik book that's going to tell me, you know, all this stuff that I'm just, you know, imagine myself to be in Ras Leela and that's it. It doesn't work like that. You got to go through an arta nivritti, and that's hard work. But the only way that you can go through an arta nivritti is by mercy. We need to remember that. We have to make our effort, but we cannot think that this isn't the first instruction that he gave to Arjuna, no? What is the famous verse? Karnamani evadhikaraste. Your only right is to work. Ma paleshu kadachana, but you can't have your paycheck. You got to work for free. And ma karma phale heturpur. You can't even take pride in your work because you're not doing that. You're not producing the result. That's what we're saying here. And finally, mate sangos tua karmani. You can't not work also. I was in the University of Hawaii once, talking to one professor, and he was an Indologist. So I asked him, you know, he is Hindu. I asked him, you know, I had some questions about the Upanishads or something. He said, he didn't want to talk about it. He said, no, just understand this thing. Here in this verse, Krishna is telling us, you know, you can only work, you can't be paid for your work, you can't be proud of your work, and you can't stop working. Well, who's going to buy that? This is slavery, isn't it? The man on the street is going to say, I'm out of here. So, yeah, this is the thing. That we have to wrap our head around that fact that, yes, this is what it means to surrender. Why do we have the name Dasa? What does Dasa mean? Slave. Of course, Indian, you know, civilized countries don't have slaves like this country had slaves. That's a different thing. But, you know, slave really means I'm sold to you like an animal. No independence. Is it okay? It's clear at least. No, this is why we chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Because, you know, when we actually get a sense, this is why Manushyanam Sahasreshu. Once people recognize that, wait a minute, there's actually nothing for me here, then they leave. This is why it's so few people. But if we're really chanting the holy name sincerely, then that name does some magic on our heart. Jayapataka Swami calls it magic dust. The Krishna sprinkles, really, Radharani sprinkles her magic dust on our heart, and then suddenly, okay, I'll do it. You see? This is why we chant. It's not enough to hear all this knowledge. Because, you know, once you realize what it really entails and how it threatens sense gratification, immediately everybody rejects. That's why half a century after the instruction was given, ISKCON has virtually nothing to show Srila Prabhupada with regards to Varnashram. Hai na?